Dave Talks Comics, Episode 95, Legion of Superheroes, The Great Darkness Saga, Part 2. Welcome to Dave Talks Comics, a program on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comic books I have read and cartoons I have watched. I talk from my notes. I don't go panel by panel or scene by scene. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This program is not spoiler-free. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these comic books and cartoons, I will almost certainly spoil them in some way. On this episode of Dave Talks Comics, I will be talking about Legion of Superheroes, issues 287, 288, and 289. Legion of Superheroes, Great Darkness Saga, Part 2 of what's probably going to be a 5-part series if I can do this the way I want to do it. So last time I covered issues 284, 285, and 286. This time my plan is to cover the next 3 issues, so 287 through 289. The first issue is cover dated May 1982. There is 2 stories in this issue. The first story is called Save, well, actually it says Save the Espionage Squad, but then espionage is crossed out and suicide is written in. So, if you remember from the previous issue, Chameleon Boy had ordered had taken Timberwolf and Shrinking Violet with him on this mission because he had announced that he was apparently the permanent leader of the Legion's espionage squad. This issue opens with Lightning Lad. Let's see, did I tell you who wrote this? This was written by Paul Levitz and drawn by Keith Giffen and Bruce Patterson, and the issue is cover dated May 1982. So the issue opens with Lightning Lad arriving back at Legion of Superheroes HQ. He's enraged at Chameleon Boy for taking off from the party that they were having in the previous issue. Now Chameleon Boy's already gone at this point. He and Timberwolf and Shrieking Violet have already taken off. I'm a little curious as to why he's so mad. It seems very, I don't know, almost dictatorial of him to expect nobody to leave without his permission, even though he is the leader. I don't know. I mean, this isn't a military unit or something. I suppose it is a team, but still, it seems a little out of line for him to be as angry as he is. Now, once he finds out what Chameleon Boy did and how big of a mistake it was, well, maybe then he would have reason to be as angry as he is at the beginning of this issue. So after seeing that, after seeing Lightning Lad find out exactly where they've gone to, then the scene shifts to Chameleon Boy and Shrinking Violet and Timberwolf, who are on their way to Kundia, the Kund homeworld. And I mentioned the Kunds in the last episode that I talked about the Great Darkness Saga, because of course they played a role in that second issue, the Night Never Falls at Nullport issue. So the 3 Legionnaires are on their way. They're traveling in a hollowed-out asteroid on this espionage mission. It's not entirely clear why Chameleon Boy wanted to go there. Obviously, the Kunds are not a peace-loving people. They're trouble, probably, for the most part. But what exactly it is he hopes to find out is not entirely clear. Now, one thing that you do start getting in this issue, and this doesn't happen in every issue at this point, is you get these, as they're traveling there, you get these little text boxes explaining things, and they're all attributed to Encyclopedia Galactica. And throughout this issue, they're all about Kundia. So every few pages, you'll see a little text box, and it'll give you a little more information about what's going on as the Legionnaires are on this foreign planet. Alien planet? Maybe alien planet? So before we get into that, you get to see. Oh, and I assume that this is something that Paul Levitz probably got from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I can't remember if it had the same name, if it was Encyclopedia Galactica, but it was something like that. So I tend to think that he took that name from, and the idea from there. If you've ever seen either the movie or the old TV show of Hitchhiker's Guide, or maybe heard, I think it was originally a radio program before it was even a novel. I haven't read the novel. I've seen the old TV show, and I saw the movie from a few years. Geez, it's probably more than a few years ago. It's probably 5 or 8 years ago at this point. So the espionage squad... Oh, wait, before the espionage squad arrives on Kundia, you do get a brief flashback to... not a flashback, but the scene shifts to Legion headquarters where you see Lightning Lad stepping down as leader. He, I guess, feels if he can't control the team, if he can't exercise this dictatorial control over the team, that's my opinion there, then he's going to step down. He puts Element Lad in charge of the team because Element Lad was the deputy leader or something like that. He was the second in command of the Legion. So... back to Kundia. So the espionage squad arrives on Kundia, and they have disguises. Of course, Chameleon Boy can, change his appearance, so he makes himself look like a Kund. And they have some technology that they use that Timberwolf and Shrinking Violet use to disguise themselves. But it doesn't last very long because they very quickly get into a brawl. Despite having these disguises, they very quickly get into a brawl with a local badass by the name of Karlak. And not only do they get into a brawl with him, this whole thing is televised, and this is a very big deal there. In fact, if you look at the cover of this issue, you'll see that it shows Karlak odds against survival 17-1. So Legion of Superheroes versus Karlak, odds against survival 17-1, and Karlak looks like he's beating the crap out of them on that cover. But, so one neat thing that you do get in the middle of this fight is that, and this is not from Encyclopedia Galactica, but from the Legion databank, you get a quick explanation of Timberwolf's powers as he's fighting Karlak. Because Karlak manages to, he hasn't taken out any of the other members of the espionage squad, but it says... Legion Databank, Timberwolf, powers, super strength, super speed, extraordinary agility, and acrobatic skill, specialty unarmed combat. And you see him jumping all over the place and then kicking Karlak in the head. But, so they managed to beat Karlak, but they've blown their identities in the process, and they have half of the planet, at least half of the planet, chasing after them. And so they take off flying. Of course, they've got the Legion flight rings, so they can use those to fly. And there's this neat scene where Shrinking Violet and Chameleon Lad leap onto Timberwolf's backs. Chameleon Boy. I always want to call him Chameleon Lad for some reason. Maybe he was Chameleon Lad at one point. Chameleon Boy turns into this real stretchy kind of creature, and Shrinking Violet shrinks down and jumps on Timberwolf's back, and they take off flying. And at first they're not sure where they're going to go, and then all of a sudden a spaceship shows up and says, "Over here!" And it's Colossal Boy and Saturn Girl who've shown up to rescue the espionage squad. Now they're getting chased. Now while it helps the espionage squad to finally be on a spaceship piloted by other members of the Legion, they're all getting chased by Kund warcraft, and so they attempt to warp out of there, but they don't have time to really plot it, and so they jump really fast. they warp really fast, and they end up crashing right into an asteroid when they come out of the warp. And that's where this story ends. Now, this is the first of two stories in this issue. The other story is called Prologue to Darkness. Once again, written by Paul Levitz. Now, the art in this case is by Pat Broderick and Larry Malstead. And this is just a short little story in which we see Mon-El and Shadowlass, who are another couple. I mentioned a number of couples in the last episode, like Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl, Timberwolf and Lightlass, Bouncing Boy and Duplicate and Duo Damsel. I can't think of any others. And then, of course, Mon-El and Shadowlass, Princess Projectra and Karate Kid. So here we see Mon-El and Shadowlass, who are off on a mission to investigate this uncharted planet that has drifted into major interstellar routes. That's the way it's described in this, and that's a quote. Because apparently robotic probes have been sent out, but they haven't returned or responded. So the Legion has sent a couple of their own to investigate this planet. And so they go down there to investigate. They encounter some resistance from some robots, not the same robot probes that they had sent, but some robots, I guess, that were already on this planet. And they eventually leave, and as they're leaving, you see this dark figure emerging from a deep sleep. And you don't see him up close, but you see him laughing, and he is laughing, and and energy is crackling from his eyes. And so that's our first look at this villain, who possibly is the same person who's on the cover of this collection of the Great Darkness Saga. But and this one is, of course, called Prologue to Darkness. So the next issue kind of picks up on where issue 286, I believe it was. No, 285. No, 286. Yes, 286 left off. 286 left off where Princess Projectra and Karate Kid had been captured by Princess Projectra's cousin, Pharaox, and were going to be executed. So this issue is called The Legionnaires Made for Burning, and the cover shows 6 members of the Legion, not just Projectra and Karate Kid, but you also see Dream Girl and Shadowlass and Mon-El and Ultra Boy. And it's a really cool cover. Did I mention that issue 287 was the first issue that I ever bought? The previous issue, Save the Espionage or Suicide Squad. That was the first issue of Legion of Superheroes I ever bought. I still have an affinity for this story because of this. I mean, I know people who started reading like X-Men very early on and whose first story was the Dark Phoenix Saga. I missed that, but this was something which I was lucky enough to step right into, right as it was beginning. And I really loved this story. But so back to issue 288, which the Legionnaires Made for Burning. And it opens with Karate Kid and Princess Projectra, who are locked up on Orando, which is her home world, awaiting execution, basically at the hands of her cousin Pharaox. Now, she's kind of in an amorous mood. She wants to know why Karate Kid isn't holding her in their last moments before they're going to be executed. He is thinking about escape, and he's doing this very cool thing, which I really love, this opening splash page, where he is using a rock to chip away at one of the columns in their cell, and has used this rock to chip away at this column and form a sword or a dagger out of the stone. And he talks about this as stone fighting from Zwen, which I assume is a planet where Karate Kid studied. I'm not sure if Zwen actually shows up anywhere else, or if this is just one of those one-off little mentions of it. So basically, he attempts to escape, and he uses this sword, or not sword, but it's a dagger or a short sword that he's created, and he attempts to escape when they come to take them away to be executed, but Ferox shows up and it manages to beat them down again, and so their escape attempt is unsuccessful. Meanwhile, back at Legion of Superheroes headquarters, we see a meeting, and this is to address the issue of the missing Legionnaires, the three members of the espionage squad, plus the 2 members of the rescue team that were sent to find them. Those being, so that's Chameleon Boy, Timberwolf, Shrinking Violet, Saturn Girl, and did I mention their name? I'm not sure if I mentioned their names when I was talking about the previous issue, but that ship that the 3 members of the espionage squad that came to rescue them was being piloted by Saturn Girl and Colossal Boy. So the 5 of them, of course, crashed into that asteroid at the end of the previous issue, and they're not sure what to do. They know that they don't have any contact with them. The members of the Legion who are back at Legion headquarters aren't sure what to do, and so they're discussing what to do, the idea of sending out search parties, and you get this great 12-panel grid page, which is about the 4th or 5th page. Let's see, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the 6th page in this issue, and it's this great page where you get, these little close-ups of various Legionnaires at this meeting, offering their opinions of what to do and what they, how they're feeling and what they think needs to be done. And I really like it. Of course, this is Keith Giffen drawing this issue. Did I mention that? Keith Giffen and Bruce Patterson once again. So that's just a page or 2 of that, and then it's back to Orlando, where there's a rescue team that has been sent to rescue Princess Projectra and Karate Kid. And it's the same members that I mentioned who were on the cover. That is Shadowlass, Dream Girl, Ultra Boy, and Mon-El. So they arrive on Orlando, and they see that that their teammates are about to get burned at the stake. And so they swoop in there, and one of these pages, when they make an attempt to rescue them, and Ultra Boy uses this really cool trick that I thought was great. First, he uses what he calls his flash vision, which is kind of like Superboy's heat vision, or Mon-El, I guess, also has heat vision. And then he uses his ultra breath? Yes, his ultra breath. That's what he calls it. And what he does is, because they get attacked by some of the guards there, and the guards are all dressed in armor, and so he uses the flash vision to melt their armor, and then quickly, before it melts too much, he uses his ultra breath to freeze the armor, and so they're frozen in place. They can't move. And I thought that was I like the way they draw it, and I love the idea of it as well. And of course, once again, this was one of the first issues that I read of Legion of Superheroes, so I thought it was very cool. And of course, Ultra Boy kind of has the same sort of powers as Superboy or Mon-El do, but he can only use one power at a time. And I think that's basically his story. I don't think there's anything too much more to it. But anyway, despite his attempt to rescue them, despite the fact that he immobilizes all these guards, they don't notice that Ferox has an ally whose name is Saga, who is a witch, and she manages to take down the 4 Legionnaires, and so they're not entirely successful in their attempt to rescue their teammates. So back at Legion headquarters, we see the search parties taking off. We got just a brief interlude. We see the search parties taking off while Lightning Lad stays back and holds down the fort. Then it's back to Orlando. And now there's 6 Legionnaires at the stake, kind of like is shown on the cover. And they're, who are going to burn. But the Legionnaires still have a few tricks up their sleeve. And Dream Girl uses some magic. Now, Dream Girl has a sister whose name is the White Witch. And I'm not sure if she shows up anywhere in the Great Darkness Saga. She certainly does show up in some other issues of Legion of Superheroes, and I'm pretty sure she had shown up on this point by this point. But I'm not sure how many appearances she had or how far back she goes. So Dream Girl apparently knows some magic too, and she uses some magic to free herself from the stake that she's attached to. And she's got, of course, has her flight ring, and she floats up and then kind of making a distraction while Shadowlass then uses her powers of darkness to turn everything dark. And in the meanwhile, Haga assumes that this is a trick by Princess Projectra, so she attacks Projectra, but and then so a fight ensues. So Dream Girl's free, and Shadowlass is using her powers, and then we finally get to see. Then we get a shift in scene, and we get to see what's going on in this asteroid, where the ship crashed with the 5 Legionnaires who had come from Kundia. Now, this asteroid is a frozen asteroid. I guess it must have some kind of atmosphere because they're able to breathe. You see things getting kind of prickly. Everybody's kind of angry with Chameleon Boy. But at the same time, you also see a certain amount of romance blooming. As things get prickly, you see some of the Legionnaires kind of pairing off and walking off on their own. First you see Timberwolf picking up Saturn Girl and walking off with her, and then you see them embracing, which is kind of interesting considering the fact that she's married and he's dating her sister-in-law. So that's an interesting development. I mean, this is a comic book, and it's, PG at best, or at worst, however you want to look at it. But it's interesting that that they would show something like this. I mean, it's interesting for the the relationships, the developments, and the other thing I suppose I should say is that Saturn Girl, prior to this, normally was wearing this bikini-type outfit, and apparently the spaceship they were on luckily had a spare uniform of hers, and it was one of her old uniforms, which covered her body in full, other than her face and her hands. Well, I guess also her hands, because it looks like she's wearing gloves. But so she's able to keep a little warmer that way, but I guess embracing Timberwolf keeps her a bit warmer. And at the same time, you also see Colossal Boy and Shrinking Violet getting rather amorous. Now, they're not involved with anybody else, at least not to my knowledge at this point. And you also see Chameleon Boy creeping around and trying to do things to fix things, being unsuccessful, and then walking in as Shrinking Violet and Colossal Boy are making out. So back on Orando, the Legionnaires break free and defeat Ferox and Haga, and you see Princess Projectra get crowned as Queen Projectra, and the final page is this great splash page by, of course, Keith Giffen and Bruce Patterson, where you get some more of this armor of the Knights of Orando and other designs, which I think are very cool. And there are some other pages here that are fairly cool. Some of the scenes, the creature that Haga tries to conjure to fight no, it's not Haga, it's Ferox that tries to conjure to fight the Legionnaires is kind of neat looking. And the other thing that I think is really cool that Keith Giffen and Bruce Patterson draw in this issue are some of the creatures. Well, actually, I think there's only one creature in this issue that Chameleon Boy turns into. But the other thing is the facial expression. Some of these facial expressions, in particular, I think Lightning Lad and also Chameleon Boy's facial expressions, an interesting range. They're not all the same. Unlike, say, I always think of an artist whose work I really like, Jim Aparo, but always seems to, his one expression that he seems to do quite a bit, not all of his characters are like this, is the shocked expression. And I always think about that, Batman with that shocked expression from various issues of Brave and the Bold. But I really like the work that Keith Giffen and Bruce Patterson do in this issue and in previous issues. I think I've mentioned. I mean, that 12-panel grid I mentioned earlier, and some of these other pages. So on to the third and final issue I'm going to talk about this time around, and that's number 289. This is from July of 1982, and so this one is called a cold and lonely corner of hell. And the cover shows the 5 Legionnaires on this asteroid, which is very icy, and they've got a fire burning in front of them. And you can see, the star field of space behind them. And so the issue opens with them still on the asteroid. Everybody's cold. Everybody's still angry at Chameleon Boy. The flight rings serve 2 purposes that the Legionnaires have. They enable them to fly, but they're also signaling and communication type devices. But apparently the cold on the asteroid is too much for the flight rings. And so they're not working. The signaling device is not working because of the cold. You get to see Chameleon Boy in another one of these crazy shapes. He's transformed himself into this creature which is supposed to reflect heat better to help the others stay warm. I guess he's not as affected by the cold. I'm not sure. They don't really go into details. Then what we get is we start to see some of these search teams. In the previous issue, the Legionnaires had decided to send out search teams to look for the espionage squad. And so the first search team is made up of Sunboy and Block. And they are on Yucatan 7. And we know this because we get a little blurb from Encyclopedia Galactica. Now, this is the first time we've seen Encyclopedia Galactica since issue 287. There was no mention of Encyclopedia Galactica in the previous issue. And Yucatan 7 is a jungle planet, and they wind up getting in a fight with these reptile creatures. Now, the reason why they were there, why the 2 Legionnaires, Sunboy and Block, traveled to Yucatan 7, was because there was reports of a crashed spaceship, and they were hoping that it was the spaceship that held their teammates. But anyway, so they get into this fight with these reptile creatures who they think may have attacked or eaten the people who were on the shipwrecked spaceship, I guess. But actually, it turns out that they're the ones who were shipwrecked, and so that doesn't look. So they're a little concerned, but I guess they're unable to communicate with these creatures. And then at the last minute they realize after beating the crap out of them that these are the shipwreck victims and not some dangerous life form on Yucatan 7. Then we get a quick flashback, a quick shift of scene back to Legion headquarters, where you see the rescue team that just went to Orlando in the previous issue. Mon-El, Ultra Boy, Shadow Lass, and Dream Girl has arrived back, and they find Lightning Lad, who kind of fills them in on what's going on, and the fact that he's quit as the leader of the team and of the Legion, and so he lets them know what's going on. So then we get to see the second search team, which is made up of Dawnstar and Light Lass. Now, Dawnstar has these enormous wings. She and has tracking abilities, and she wears an outfit, and her skin tone makes her kind of look like she's Native American. That's probably the inspiration for the character, and of course, like a lot of these female characters, wears a very skimpy outfit. And for some reason, and I don't know if this has ever been explained, she has tracking abilities which can track things over extremely long distances. And so she's hoping she can get the scent, I guess, or something like that of the missing Legionnaires. And she can also survive in space. She doesn't need oxygen in space, so that I don't know if that's ever been explained. But so Light Lass is in a spaceship, Dawnstar is out in space, and they're flying around near. Let me see my notes. They're flying around where they think the team was, but they wind up getting hit by a solar storm, and the spaceship that Light Lass is in explodes. But Dawnstar manages to rescue her, and so then they go flying off, and then we're back on the asteroid. And back on the asteroid, we get to see Saturn Girl and Timberwolf getting closer and closer, staring deeply into one another's eyes. And then they find out that that Chameleon Boy's found something. Is it Chameleon Boy? Yes, Chameleon Boy found something in the wreckage, and so they go running off to take a look at that. Then we get our second look at our mysterious villain, who was last seen in issue 287 when Mon-El and Shadowlass were investigating that planet which had shifted into major interstellar trade routes. So we get a brief glimpse of this. We see him shooting power out of his hands to, let me see, it says 5 pods fall, smash open, and from them crawl shapes too loathsome to bear names. Even he would not name them, save in scorn, but they are his servants. They shall herald his rebirth and an innocent universe. A universe has forgotten how evil one being can be. So who could this be? Well, you can always look at the cover of the collection if you're curious. But so that's all we get from that. But at the same time, search team number 3 is nearby and that's made up of Phantom Girl and Starboy. Starboy wanted to go by this world to check it out. And just as they're passing by is when this mysterious villain is using his power, and so they get a reading of this burst of energy, but at the same time they can see that there's no life readings on the world that Shadowlass and Mon-El visited. So they keep going because they assume that there's nothing there, that it can't be that the search team is down there. So meanwhile, back on the asteroid, using what Chameleon Boy found, Saturn Girl and Shrinking Violet have figured out a way to rig a flare. And so they send up this flare using an antimatter pod or the antimatter pods. And so they send up this huge flare from the asteroid, which creates, a huge burst of light, although it doesn't last very long. Which works, but at the same time, some other stuff catches fire, and it blows up all their supplies. Now, this page where everything blows up, I think, is really awesome. It's page 15 of this issue, and you see them rushing to get away. Timberwolf grabs Saturn Girl, and Shrinking Violet shrinks down and jumps onto his back, and Colossal Boy grabs Chameleon Boy. And they take off, and I just love the motion in this panel, this page, which for the most part consists of one big panel. You got a couple smaller panels, but there's one big, huge panel where you see them all kind of taking off, and very neat. Now the next page, is more of them they've gotten away from the explosion. Now they don't know what they're going to do because they don't have any supplies. It's cold. They don't have any supplies. They don't know if anybody knows where they are. You get this, it's a great 9-panel grid page. More comforting, more closeness between Saturn Girl and Timberwolf. And just as they're hugging, who shows up but Dawnstar and Light Lass? And it's at first it seems like, oh, it's so good to see you guys, but Light Lass isn't too happy with Timberwolf, and she doesn't like the image of him hugging her sister-in-law. So and that's it basically for this story. I mean, Timberwolf says, Ayla, which is Light Lass's first name. Ayla, Lord, I'm so glad to see you again. And she's in tears, and she says, Are you really? So that's the end of that issue. So we'll see what happens to them next, because you got to remember, Light Lass's spaceship blew up. Dawnstar can fly through space, so I guess she could fly back. She knows where they're at, but the others are stuck there. 6 of them now are definitely stuck there. So then we have one final story in this issue, which is called Once Upon an Insanity. Now, I'm not crazy about this story. It's a bit of a follow-up to something that came a few years before, and this story is written by Paul Levitz and drawn by Carmine Infantino and Larry Malstead. It just involves 3 Legionnaires, Brainiac 5, Element Lad, and Matter Eater Lad. And I'm pretty sure this was my introduction to Matter Eater Lad, whose superpower is, that's right, he can eat any matter. So Brainiac 5 and Element Lad have traveled to, well, it's not exactly clear where they've traveled to, because but they're visiting Matter Eater Lad, who has gone insane, and this happened, I believe, in Superboy issues 251 and 252. Now, at that point, it was still technically Superboy, but the covers would say Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. So to Superboy 251 and 252. In that story, apparently Brainiac 5 went insane and created this machine, and this is referred to as the Omega Incident, and in order to stop Brainiac 5, Matter Eater Lad ate this machine, which in turn drove him crazy, and Brainiac 5 has yet to be able to figure out how to cure Matter Eater Lad's insanity. So he's been kept in kind of an asylum, I guess. And so they're visiting him, and while they're visiting him, they get attacked by this doctor. It's an alien. His name is Dr. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. It's Raxalim or Razalim. It's R''Xalim. But he blames Brainiac 5 for his career going down the tubes. He was a psychomedic who had helped to take care of Brainiac 5 when he was crazy, but apparently Brainiac 5 did not give a very complimentary review, I guess, on Yelp or something. I don't know, not Yelp, but, he apparently didn't say very nice things about the doctor, and so the doctor ended up losing his job, and he's a psychomedic, Dr. Rexalem. Now, the interesting thing is that when I looked him up, this was his first appearance, so he didn't show up in those issues of Superboy, I guess, issues 251 and 252. At least that's according to Comic Book DB. Now, maybe they left that out. Maybe, that needs to be updated, but I don't have those issues, so I can't read them. Maybe they're available online, and I could get them through Comixology. So, there isn't a whole lot to the story, and at this point, I'm really not sure how much follow-up there is going to be on this story. So, I guess part of the reason I wasn't too crazy about it is I'm not as crazy about Carmine Infantino's, the way he draws faces, and I don't know. I know he was a very important creator, a very important artist, and he was, I think, also the editor-in-chief at one point at DC Comics. But I'm just not crazy about the way he draws faces. And this story doesn't really do a whole lot for me on its own. Possibly it's part of a bigger story. But there's nothing really too interesting about it. I mean, obviously, Dr. Roxalim tries to kill them, and they basically end up escaping. He leaves this machine, which is going to compress this room down on them, kind of like, the trash compactor room in Star Wars. But, well, not exactly like that, but, kind of the same idea. And this was a few years after Star Wars, now that I think about it. This was 1982. Star Wars came out in 1977, so 5 years later. But of course, they managed to get out of there. So that's it for these 3 issues of Legion of Superheroes. I have a bunch more to go. This is, the what do they call it? The the new edition, the deluxe edition of the Great Darkness Saga, because the original edition only had like 6 issues in it or something, like 7 issues. This one is more like 16 issues or something like that, or 14 issues. And the next one is an annual, so it's going to be longer than the usual ones. And according to this, I'm about 40% of the way through the book at this point. It's over 400 pages long, this collection. There may be extras at the end, which are included in those 400 pages. I'm not sure. But so far, so good. I really enjoyed rereading these issues. I'm really enjoying the artwork by Keith Giffen and Bruce Patterson. Although you get a little bit of inks by Larry Malstead on that Pratt Broderick story from issue 287, I believe. And I really enjoyed the whole asteroid stuff taking place on the asteroid. I enjoy the stuff taking place in Orlando. And once again, this is partly, of course, for nostalgic reasons, because these were the first stories I read. But I really do think that Keith Giffen does a very good job with the artwork. And I think that Paul Levitz is doing a great job weaving the story together. I don't think that I read all of the issues in this collection back in the day, or have read them all ever. I know that I've read the next few issues, well, not the annual, but the next few issues after that. And so I'm curious to see how it goes, see what comes up, what memories it brings back, and maybe things that I've just completely forgotten. And so that's it for part 2 of Legion of Superheroes, The Great Darkness Saga. A few more notes about these issues of Legion of Superheroes and some related thoughts. First, I mentioned Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. That was originally a radio program, which came out in 1978. There was a book that was written also by Douglas Adams, which came out in 1979. In fact, it was the first of, I believe, 5 books, the first 2 of which were based on the radio series. There was a TV show that came out in 1981, and then there was a movie that came out in 2005. I've seen the TV show. I have not read the book or the radio program, and I've seen the movie. Now, Douglas Adams also wrote for Doctor Who back in the 1980s, specifically during the Tom Baker era. He wrote City of Death, and he wrote The Pirate Planet. He also wrote another story called Shada, which is the one story that of Tom Baker's era that was never finished. I believe that was due to a BBC strike in 1978. I might be off on the year, somewhere around there. And the reason why I brought up Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is because of the mentions of Encyclopedia Galactica in the Legion of Superheroes. But when I was doing this research, what I found, and possibly I should have known this, is that Encyclopedia Galactica, actually that name first appeared in Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. Now, I've read the first book of the Foundation series a couple times. Not recently, but a couple times. But I was never able to get through the second book. I should probably give it another try. So I'm not sure if Paul Levitz was taking that name from the Foundation series or got the idea from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But it had appeared in both of those prior to the Legion of Superheroes. In the second issue that I talked about, issue 288, Karate Kid said something about the Stone Fighters of Zwen, or maybe it was the Rock Fighters of Zwen. Anyway, I wondered if Zwen was just a one-off throwaway name, so I did a little research, and, well, actually it isn't. Zwen is the homeworld of Stone Boy, who is a member of the Legion of Substitute Heroes. He first appeared in Adventure Comics 306, along with the original members of the Legion of Substitute Heroes, and from what I read in Who's Who and on Comic Book DB, it sounds like he at one point was granted membership but decided to stick with the with the Legion of Substitute Heroes rather than join the Legion of Superheroes. And if you want to know more about the Legion of Substitute Heroes, I'd say take a look at Comic Book DB or at Wikipedia. Now, I've got 4 characters. The rest of my notes are about 4 characters who appear in these 3 issues, or who at least are mentioned in these 3 issues. And let's see, I'm going to take them in the order that they originally appeared, rather than the order that they are mentioned. The first one is Ultra Boy. His real name is Jonah, and his first name is Joe, and his last name is Na. And with a name like Jonah, it shouldn't be surprising that he acquired his powers when he was swallowed by an energy beast, which, according to Who's Who, was probably a descendant of some beasts that had originally lived on Krypton. And so he got the powers basically that Kryptonians have, except for, as I mentioned before, he can only use one power at a time. And his first appearance was in Superboy number 98, which was dated July of 1962. Chronologically speaking, the next character would be Matter Eater Lad. Now, he first appeared in Adventure Comics number 303, which was dated December of 1962. And he was a character who did not appear as regularly as some other characters. He was kind of an off-and-on Legionnaire until about 1975, Superboy number 212, and at that point he left the Legion to go into politics on Bismol, his homeworld. Now, of course, his power is that he could eat anything, as all the people of his home planet, Bismol, could. And after 1975, prior to the Great Darkness Saga, he only had 3 other appearances, and those were in Superboys 251, 252, and 256, and that was about the period where Brainiac 5 went insane and created this machine, and this is referred to as the Omega Incident, and to stop Brainiac 5 and stop this machine, Matter Eater Lad ate the machine, but that drove him insane. When did he eventually got cured, but when that happened exactly, and he was cured by Brainiac 5, but when that happened exactly, I'm not entirely sure. I tried to look it up. I tried to find something on it. I think that by 1985 he had been cured. And he does have 3 appearances coming up right around the end of the Great Darkness Saga in issues 296, 297, and 300. So possibly he gets cured in one of those issues, but I'm not sure. The next character to appear that I wanted to talk about is the White Witch. Now, she is Dream Girl's sister. She first appeared in Adventure Comics number 350. Oh, wait a minute. No. The next character that I want to talk about didn't actually appear in this hasn't appeared yet in the Great Darkness Saga, but will be appearing later in the Great Darkness Saga, and that is the White Witch. She is the sister of Dream Girl. Her first appearance was in Adventure Comics number 350, which is dated November of 1966. She was also in issue 351 and issue 370, but then that was it for quite a while. Basically until her appearance in the Great Darkness Saga, which is coming up in a few, maybe several issues. I doubt that's going to be the next episode that I'll be talking about the Great Darkness Saga, maybe part 4 and possibly not till part 5. And for all I know, it may just be a cameo appearance. I can't tell based on the information in Comic Book DB, and I didn't want to flip ahead. So she's the sister of Dream Girl. They come from this planet where everybody has precognitive abilities, but for some reason she was born without precognitive abilities. And this was a great, it makes her feel like an outcast or a reject, and so she went to the sorcerer's world, and she studied there and became a powerful sorcerer, and hence, I guess, why she took the name the White Witch. I have not read those early appearances of her, so I don't know too much. She can cast spells, but I don't know the extent of her powers, and I didn't take great notes from Who's Who. The final character that I want to talk about is Dawnstar. She first appeared in Superboy number 225, which was cover dated April of 1977. So just about, 4 or 5 years before the Great Darkness Saga. Now, she is described in Who's Who as being a mutant and an Amarind or an Anasazi. Now, when I looked up the term, in fact, in Who's Who, it described her as an Amarind, which I suppose must be short for American Indian. When I looked her up in the comic book DB, it mentioned that she was a member of the Anasazi. Now, when I look up the term Anasazi in Wikipedia, what I get is that's a term for the Pueblo Indian peoples. But it's not a Pueblo term, it's a term from the Navajo, and it's not considered to be it's considered to be an insult, I believe, to the Pueblos. So anyway, getting back to Dawnstar, before she joined the Legion, which she really didn't have, I don't think she had any history. I think her first appearance she joined the Legion, but before she joined the Legion, she had been a bounty hunter. And basically her powers are speed, flight, her tracking abilities, and her ability to survive in space. And I couldn't find any description of why she's able to survive in space, but she is a mutant, so I guess that's just one of her mutant powers. That's it for episode 95 of Dave Talks Comics. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com and facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. On Twitter, @DaveTalksComics. Email can be sent to davetalkscomics@gmail.com. I'm Dave. I'm Dave. I'm Dave. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.